ISO 27001, Annex A 6.1, screening. So here we are looking at people controls. This is the first of the people controls that we're going to go through. And here we're looking at screening our employees, our contractors, our third parties. This is about what we would call in the olden days background checks, right? Doing background checks on employees. Let's have a little look at what the standard says, and then I can show you how to be successful. So the definition of the standard. Background verification checks on all candidates to become personnel should be carried out prior to joining the organization and on an ongoing basis in consideration of applicable laws, regulations, and ethics, and be proportionate to the business requirements, the classification of the information to be accessed, and the perceived risks. So what are we looking at here? We're looking at doing those background checks. There's a couple of changes in the 2022 version of the standard. It's now brought out that requirement to do these checks prior to employment, okay? So you are absolutely going to require the help of a HR professional, your HR team. I am not a HR professional expert. That HR professional is going to keep you on the right side of the law, and they're going to be making sure that you implement best practice. So you're going to be working with them to implement our information security requirements. Anything they say top trumps anything I say, especially as the laws in relation to individuals per jurisdiction globally can differ. Okay, so this is just general guidance. But what are we looking at doing? We're looking at doing a background check, a verification check, a screening check on employees before they start, multiple times during their employment or engagement with us. So again, there's a slight subtle change. This is going to be an ongoing process, but the standard does make reference to business need. What are the needs of the business, risk, and the role that is being performed. So you are going to be proportionate to that. This is probably something that you already have in place with your HR teams, but if it isn't, let's go through some of the considerations that we can go through. So what are the kind of things that we can check? The kind of things that we can check references, we can verify CVs, we can confirm qualifications, we can verify identity, and where appropriate and if needed, we can look at criminal or financial checks. So there's a lot of things that we can check, again, proportionate to the risk. Do we need to do criminal and financial checks on somebody that works in the reception? Maybe, but maybe not. But it is more likely that it is going to be applicable to somebody that's maybe the head of finance, a global IT administrator. So it's going to be proportionate to the role. My top tip and advice here would be to set out within your HR policy, your HR process, different levels of role that you can apply people to, and then to have standard checks and balances around that level of role so that you're consistent in your approach, so that you're addressing each individual fairly and consistently. But again, always with reference back to the law and what it is that you can do within your jurisdiction. So let's look at different types of things, principles, keys that I want you to consider. So for information security roles, for people in information security roles, you want to make sure that they're competent to do the job and can be trusted, right? This is referenced in the standard, competent and trusted. So how would I go about that? Well, trusted is difficult, right? I don't know what the standard means by trusted. I'm not too sure it knows what it means by trusted, or in fact, how you can verify and prove that somebody is trusted. But what you can do is look at competence for role. So this is driving us down, checking certifications, qualifications, experience, making sure that the people that you have are competent to perform the role. This calls back to the ISO 27001 clause on competence, right? We've said that all along. You know, you need people that are competent to run the information security management system, and it is one of the areas where they can fail you. So as part of that screening, what it's saying here is consider that check, right? Including that check as part of your screening prior to employment and also potentially during employment at various points. We have to give consideration to following the law, right? There is no two ways around this. You can't do anything at all in your organization that breaks the law. So everything that you do within the people controls, you're going to run past legal, and you're going to run past your HR professional, and you're going to make sure that you are absolutely golden when it comes to meeting the requirement of the law. A consideration that it gives you is if you don't do or you can't do checks on time, okay? Basically what it's saying is don't allow anybody access to anything unless you've done the checks. In the real world, it may well be that you onboard somebody and they start their role before they've done those checks. What I would say is, if that is going to be the case, as with everything in 27001, if you have an anomaly, if you have a variation to process or policy, of which that would be one, put it on your risk register and manage it through risk, right? Your standard approach is that you do the checks before somebody is employed, before they start their role. But if there is a situation where you can't do it, make sure that that person is on the risk register with compensating controls about what it is that you've put in place prior to the checks coming through, the date when the check is going to be through, and accept the risk through your risk management process, right? At that point, they're not going to be in a position when it comes to your external audit to fail you. If your standard process is that you allow everybody access prior to doing check-in, then you may have a different conversation, right? The standard also now references periodic checking. Now, periodic checking again is going to be based on role. The higher the role, the more, the more senior the role, the more risky or the more risk that's baked into that role. You may want to do those checks a little bit more often. So you might want to do those on an annual basis. But again, consult with your HR team to figure that out, and then have a compelling conversation, compelling narrative that you can share with the auditor about why it is that you do the checks on the frequency that you do them. So it's not a particularly hard one. It does place heavy reliance on HR. It is relatively easy, relatively straightforward, and I'm not aware of any standard HR processes that wouldn't kind of follow this approach, really. So it can be just the case that you're checking with HR to make sure that they do, and that you can reference and point to the documentation when it comes to the audit to show that you do it. Common mistakes that people make in this area is that screening is included in your HR process. This is normally for like early stage tech startup. You might be 2 to 10 people or 1 to 10 people. You know everybody, you've never seen a requirement, you've never seen the need to do those checks. My recommendation would be do them, prior to the audit, because then it cuts out any questions. Just follow the process, even if you have to retrofit people through it. And if you're not going to do that, again, it's a risky strategy, but you could put that on your risk register with the compensating controls of the words that you would have potentially just said to me, which is, I know them, they're family, we've worked together forever, they're a co-founder, they're a shareholder, whatever it may be. So one of two approaches: the fastest, easiest, quickest approach, put them through the process, get the documentation, and then it's ticked off. Another mistake that we see is that your process doesn't include a step for what if the checks fail. Okay, so the auditor is going to ask that question. If you are screening an employee, you are screening a contractor, or you've got a requirement on your supplier to screen a contractor, assuming it meets the law, what happens if they fail? What happens if that screening process fails? And there's a lot of considerations in there about, again, working with HR about how you communicate that to them, whether or not you do a secondary round of checks, whether or not you still accept them but put in place compensating controls or not. So that really needs some thought about what you will do if somebody fails the check, and then how you can continue to meet your legal requirement for personal data, subject to the data protection jurisdiction that you're in, about how you then manage their applications and the data that you've collected so far on them. Okay, so they're the two things that that we see that fail. But 27001 screening, how would I go about it? I would work with a third-party screening company. There are many that are out there. You submit the details to them, they send you back, based on the level of check that you've paid for. I would do it that way, right? I would work with a third party, a trusted third party in this space, and then I would maintain evidences that I did the screening and I did the checks. I would keep copies of CVs. I would ask for copies of certificates where it was appropriate, and qualifications where it was appropriate, specifically under the clause on competence, so that I can evidence that this person is competent, has gone through the checks, and we've done everything that we can to manage the risk. My name is Stuart Barker. I am the ISO 27001 Ninja. We're working our way through the 8 people controls. So stay with me, or stick with me, or hop along to the next one. But for now, peace out.